Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you my July book haul. So, the thumbnail for this is quite deceptive, because I hauled a lot of books in July. I hauled 32 books in July, which is great. Some of them I've already read, which is very good, very helpful. Not enough of them though. So yeah, in the interests of time, I am going to go ahead and rattle through these fairly quickly. As per usual, I will direct you to links down below if you want to check out a little bit more about these books, but I'm going to divide them into publisher copies, NetGalley copies, and then just stuff that I purchased for myself. You can get a little preview of what we're going to talk about later because this stack of books is too heavy for me to move. But before we get there, I have some physical copies from publishers that I've been sent. These are all books that come out in the next couple of months. And like, y'all, this is a top-notch stack of books here. I'm really excited for all of these. As soon as I'm done with this video, they're going straight onto my nightstand. So first up, from Del Rey, I have The Winter Garden by Alexandra Bell. She's written some, like, I think middle grade and YA stuff, but I believe this is her first adult novel, which is quite exciting. This comes out on the 2nd of September. So this says that it's a book for readers of The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. I also get kind of Night Circus vibes from this book because we follow a young woman who, when she is an 8-year-old, just after her mother dies, she receives an invitation to a mysterious place called the Winter Garden, and it's a place that's filled with, like, magic and wonder and strange and unusual things. And she visits the garden every night for 7 days, and then it vanishes. So 18 years later, on the eve of her wedding to a man that she does not love, but her father approves of, she ends up throwing off Victorian expectations and going in search of the garden once again. This sounds wonderful, this sounds magical. One of my good friends has read this already and I think she really enjoyed it. So this is going to be a really, really, really good one. I'm very excited for this. Next up, I have one that comes out at the end of October. This is Far from the Light of Heaven by Tade Thompson. I have not read any of his books yet, but the Rosewater series is supposed to be really, really good. It's sat on my shelf right now. Classic. But this is a new book that is separate from that series. So this book follows a colony ship called Ragtime, which has traveled light years through the stars from home to bring 1,000 sleeping souls to safety among the stars. However, some of the sleepers will never wake, and a profound and sinister mystery unfolds on the gigantic vessel. Its skeleton crew is forced to make decisions that will have repercussions for all of humanity's settlements. Super vague, you know that's my absolute favorite thing. I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is going to be fascinating, and like, this cover is perfect. The next book that I have comes out on the 4th of November. This is very, very intriguing. I'm really looking forward to this. This is another one where I have heard friends who have read this have absolutely loved it. I am so hyped for this. This is Jade, Fire of Gold by June C.L. Tan. This comes out from Hodder and Stoughton again in November, and I think it's going to be a fabulous read. So we got some vague description here on the inside cover. So we follow two characters. We have An, who is no one with no past and no family, and we have Altan, who is a lost heir, his future stolen away as a child. So the two of them end up meeting, and he sees An as this way to kind of reclaim his stolen throne, and she sees him as a way to finally unlock her past and understand her lethal magical abilities, but they may have to pay a far deadlier price than either could have imagined. This sounds so good. I'm really excited for this. I have been seeing people talking about this on social media a little bit, and every time I see a little bit more and a little bit more, I get more and more hype for this. So this is one I think I'm gonna read really soon. And last but not least, for publisher copies, I have A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. This comes out from Tor Books in November, and this looks delightful. So this is a book that takes place in a kind of alternate Edwardian England, and we follow a character named Robin who is accidentally appointed as a liaison to a hidden magical society, and he's astonished to find out that magic is real and very dangerous. So he's cursed by mysterious attackers and plagued by visions, and he's determined to drag answers out from his missing predecessor, but to do so he will need the help of Edwin Corsi, his cold and prickly counterpart in the magical bureaucracy. And they are forced to work together, and they will stumble upon a plot that threatens the very foundations of the magical world. This is a queer romance. It is a sort of alternate history. These are all things that I love. I think that this is just going to be a goddamn delight. Nope, just kidding. We have one more. I have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This one also comes out from Tor Books in October. And if you are as much of a lover of House and Cerulean Sea as I am, you're probably just as excited as I am about this book. I have talked about Under the Whispering Door a lot recently. It's in my August TBR, I think, and it's also in my 5-star NetGalley predictions video, I think. So I've talked about this a lot recently, so I'm not going to go into it again in a huge way, but basically we follow a man named Walter Price, who's a total workaholic, and he ends up meeting a Reaper at his own funeral, and he is furious. He refuses to cross over, and he ends up being led through the woods to a peculiar tea shop that lies between life and death. So he meets the curious locals, along with Hugo, who is the kind and charming owner of this tea shop, who offers to help him cross over. This is going to give me so many emotions. I expect a flood of tears, and I'm really excited for it. I'm totally here for that. This is going to be a weekend read where I don't have to be presentable the next day because I'm just going to be puffy. Okay, we're on to NetGalley books now. So there are a bunch of these. I will rattle through them pretty quickly for the sake of time and everyone's sanity, but again, links to everything will be down below. So the first one that I have on this list is A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. I have so much trouble saying that title. I don't know why. So this comes out in October from Tor Books. I am very clearly on a list. There's a lot of Tor books in here. But this is a vivid, subversive, and feminist reimagining of Sleeping Beauty. So we follow a character named Zinnia, and on her 21st birthday, she's gonna die because she contracted some kind of rare condition through a childhood industrial accident. So her best friend Charm is determined to like make her last birthday the best birthday ever, and she has a kind of full Sleeping Beauty experience organized. But when Zinnia actually does prick her finger, some strange and unexpected things happen. This looks great. I'm 50-50 on Alex E. Harrow. I would love to say she's one of my favorite authors, but she has published 2 books. I have read most of both of them. I loved one and I DNF'd the other, so I'm really, really hoping that this one is a good one, but I think it will be. Alright, next up is Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I talked about this one in my July wrap-up. This is a really, really fabulous ghost story novella. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend it if you are interested in kind of haunted house stories, ghost stories, and Japanese folklore. Next up we have Comfort Me With Apples by Catherine M. Valenti, a very strange title, but this one comes out on the 26th of October, again from Tor Books. This book follows a woman named Sophie who is made for her perfect husband. She can feel it in her bones. He is perfect. Their home together is perfect and everything is perfect. It's just that when he is away, which is often, she misses him so much. And he misses her. He says he does, so it must be true. He is the perfect husband and everything is perfect. I think I can see where some of the creepiness and thrilleriness is coming from here. This sounds like it could be a really good one. I'm a little iffy on her books. I have only ever read one. So I guess I'm not really an expert, but I DNF'd it because I absolutely hated the writing style. I think she is an author who has a very specific writing style, so we'll see how this one goes, but it is a novella, so I thought this would be a safe bet. Next up we have Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson. This comes out on the 5th of October from Simon & Schuster Kids here in the UK, and this is one I'm really, really excited for. So she is the author of Sorcery of Thorns and An Enchantment of Ravens, and I think this is going to be a really fun one. So in this book we follow a character named Artemisia, who is trained to be a Grey Sister, who is a nun who cleanses the bodies of the deceased so their souls can pass on, because in this particular place the dead do not necessarily rest. So she'd rather deal with the dead than the living, who point and whisper about the odd girl who was once possessed by a violent spirit, which sounds exciting. So her convent is attacked by possessed soldiers, and she fights back by awakening an ancient spirit bound in a high saint's relic. It is a revenant, which is a malevolent being now whispering in her head. So wielding its extraordinary power and almost consuming her body and soul, death does not come to her. Only a Vespertine, a priestess trained to wield a high relic, has a chance of stopping it. This sounds really fun. We got battle nuns and necromancy and the undead. This sounds like my jam. So next up I have The Wandering Earth by Shixian Liu. This is a collection of his short fiction. So it's 10 short stories and it's the very, very first collection of his short fiction, I think, ever. Maybe it's the first time it's been translated, but I think it's his first like ever collection of short stories. I'm really looking forward to this. I read The Three-Body Problem. It went way over my head, but I really enjoyed the kind of concepts and ideas that he had, and I'm really looking forward to reading some more of his stuff. Next up we have The Devil Makes Three by Tori Bovolino. This comes out from Titan Books in September. So this is a YA horror novel for fans of Library of the Unwritten, which I adored, and V.E. Schwab, who I don't adore, but we'll give that a pass. So basically we have two students, Tess and Elliot, who stumble upon an ancient book hidden in a secret tunnel in their school's library, and they accidentally release a devil from his book-bound prison. Basically, this is bad news, and the two of them are forced to work together to find a way to re-trap the devil before he kills everyone they know and love, including, increasingly, each other. I'm so excited for this. I think that this has the potential to be so super fun. And then coming out at the end of September, we have The Bone Ship's Wake by R.J. Barker. I'm so excited for this, as you probably can't tell from my face, because he's gonna hurt me. I know he is, because this is the last book in the Tide Child trilogy. And yeah, this is gonna hurt. This is not gonna be a fun one for me, but I'm so excited for it. I need it right now. So this series takes place in a very grim world that is basically almost completely seafaring because there is not a whole lot of land. So these ships that people travel on are built of dragon bones, as I'm sure you can imagine from the name, the Bone Ships, and we follow the crew of a black ship, which is basically a ship of the dead, and he, like, if you've read his other series, the Wounded Kingdom series, you'll know that he puts you through the emotional ringer, and he's gonna do it again, and it's gonna hurt, but I'm gonna be so happy. I love this series so much. This is like the first and second books in this series were my favorite books of last year and the year before. I'm so nervous, you guys, but it's gonna be so good. Just floods of tears. Again, I'll read it over a weekend where I don't have to see anyone in the next couple of days because I'm just gonna be laying on my side weeping, I'm sure. Next up we have Certain Dark Things from Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This comes out at the beginning of September from Joe Fletcher Books. This is a reissue of one of her previous books that went out of print, and I'm really glad they're bringing it back because she is now one of my favorite authors, and I could not get my hands on this before. So yeah, I'm really thrilled that they are bringing this back out. So this is an urban fantasy book, which is usually not my thing. I don't really like urban fantasy, but we trust in Sylvia Moreno Garcia. So this takes place in Mexico City, which is an oasis in a sort of world of vampires, basically. So we follow a kid named Domingo who's just trying to survive the heavily policed streets of Mexico City when a jaded vampire on the run swoops into his life. I'm really excited for this. I think that this is going to be so good. I love this cover. I think the cover is fabulous. And yeah, I'm really curious to see her take on vampires because everything else that I've read by her has been fabulous so far. So the next book that I have is The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This comes out from Del Rey Books in September. It's the sequel to A Deadly Education, which I haven't read yet. I really need to. That's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, I'm really excited for it because I love Naomi Novik. I don't know a huge amount about this one, other than the fact that it takes place in kind of like evil Hogwarts. It is a magic school where there are no teachers, no rules, and the school is trying to kill you. And we follow one particular student who I believe has the power to become like a super baddie. I'm not entirely sure. I'm really excited. This is one of those ones where I want to go in knowing as little as possible, which has been a little bit hard given how popular it is and some of the controversy surrounding the first book, which has since been reprinted with stuff removed. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to The Last Graduate, but first I do need to read Deadly Education. And then the last NetGalley book that I have is The Cabinet by Eunsu Kim. This is one that looks really fabulous. It's kind of a mind-bending literary fiction book that has a lot of sci-fi vibes to it. So Cabinet 13 looks like any normal filing cabinet, except this cabinet is filled with files of symptomers, which are humans who have strange abilities and bizarre experiences that might just mark the existence of a new species. But to Kong, who is the harried office worker whose job it is to guard the cabinet, the symptomers are just a headache, especially the one who won't stop calling every day asking to be turned into a cat. It's a richly funny, fantastical novel about the strangeness at the heart of even the most everyday lives from one of South Korea's most acclaimed novelists. This is part of my attempt to read more translated fiction. As you may have seen over the past couple of months, I've been trying to incorporate it a little bit more, and this sounds fabulous and charming, and again, it's another cover that I'm absolutely in love with. I think this is going to be a big win. Okay, so now we are moving on to books that I purchased or just kind of acquired through other means this month. I am again going to try to rattle through these quickly, although I am long-winded. That never really happens. So I'm just going to start grabbing books and showing them off to you. So first up, I have 3 books from subscription boxes. The first one being my Goldsboro SFF book of the month for July, which is The Gauntlet and the Fist Beneath by Ian Green. So this is a book that I had actually not heard of before I found out it was going to be the July book, which is quite exciting. So in this book, we have a character named Flore who will never let the slavers of the Empire rise again. So as a warrior of the Stormguard Commandos, she wrought horrors in the Rot Storm to protect her people, and she has now done her duty and has left this bloodshed behind. However, her peace is shattered when blazing orbs of light cut through the night sky and descend on her village, and her daughter is abducted. So now she is forced to chase across a land of twisted monsters and ancient gods and pursue the mysterious orbs whose presence could herald the return of the empire she spent her entire life fighting. We love a mom who has to go back into combat in order to protect her kid. This sounds great. So then I have my Illumicrate books for June and July. The June box was massively delayed, so they kind of arrived at the same time. The June book was The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. It has these lovely sprayed edges, and what I happen to love is the sort of naked hardback underneath. I read this in June. I thought it was okay. It wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I loved the world building. I loved the kind of take on anti-Semitism and Jewish history, but the characters were kind of meh for me. But I know a lot of people have absolutely loved this. I think this was a 3-star read for me. And then the one that I was so excited for, She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan, one of my absolute favorite books of the year. I think I read this in April or May. So first of all, like, look at those edges. Love. And underneath is pretty gorgeous as well. So this is an alternate history book that takes place in, I think it's 13th century China, which is under Mongol rule, and we have a girl who basically takes on her brother's great destiny and sort of takes his place after he is killed in a bandit raid, and it kind of goes through her life and sort of her chasing her destiny. It's so good. This is one of my favorite books of the year, and I'm so happy to have this. Right, let's grab some other stuff. We're tackling this stack. So I have 6 Wakes by Mur Lafferty. This is actually sent to me by my lovely friend Johnny on TikTok, which was so sweet. I've been wanting to read this for so long. It was on my wish list for ages because I heard it's a sci-fi horror murder mystery, which sounds like exactly my jam. I am going to go into this knowing as little as possible. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, you can check out the links below, but all I know is a lone ship, a murdered crew, and a clone who must find her own killer before they strike again. If that doesn't catch your interest, I don't know what will. Then I have The Absolute Book by Elizabeth Knox. I picked this one up after seeing it everywhere. It's one of those where I looked at the cover and I kind of was like, I'm sure that's a nice, historical fiction book. I'm probably not interested in it. And then I actually read the inside and I was like, I need that in my life. So basically, we have a girl named Taryn whose sister is killed in a horrible sort of roadside murder, and Taryn can barely remember the library at her old family home. Ever since her sister was murdered, she has forgotten so much, but now it's all coming back. The fire, the thief, the scroll box. People are asking questions about the library, questions that may relate to her sister's death, and something called The Absolute Book, a book in which secrets are written and which everyone believes only she can find, and they insist Taryn must be the hunter, but she knows the truth. She is the hunted. This sounds so good. I think this is going to be amazing. I did give it a start. I read the first chapter. Totally intrigued by this. I think it's going to be a really fabulous read. Then we have Notes from a Burning Age by Claire North. This is one that I resisted the urge to request, but I caved and I just bought it for myself when it came out. So this is kind of like a post-apocalyptic novel, I believe, and it looks really interesting. I've never read any of Claire North's books, but I think that this one will end up being fabulous. So we follow a man named Ven, who was once a holy man, a keeper of the ancient archives, and his duty was to interpret these archaic texts from the Burning Age, which was a time of excess and climate disaster. For in Ven's world, such material must be guarded closely so that the ills that led to that cataclysmic era can never be repeated. I assume that the Burning Age was our time period. But when the Revolutionary Brotherhood approaches Ven, pressuring him to translate stolen writings that threaten everything he once held dear, his life will be turned upside down. This sounds great. I have heard this recommended from a number of people who I really trust. I think it's going to be a fabulous book. I suspect it'll be a bit of a slow burn, so I might pick this one up when I have a little bit of time to spare and sort of like sink into the story. Then I picked up Songs in Ursa Major by Emma Brodie. This sounds like it's kind of a Daisy Jones and the Six-esque book, which I adore, so I decided to pick this one up. So, in this book, like even the cover looks like Daisy Jones and the Six. Scottish husband thought that I was buying another copy of Daisy Jones when we were in the bookshop together, and he was very confused. So basically in this book we follow two characters. We have Jane Quinn and Jessie Reed, who are both musicians who go on tour together, and they're pulled into each other's orbit. But Jessie's rise to fame means Jane's fall, and when she discovers a dark secret beneath his music, she picks up her guitar and writes her heartache into an album that could make or break her, which is called Songs in Ursa Major. This is set in like the 70s of like music, sex, and sun-soaked hedonism. This sounds very Daisy Jones, which means I'm excited for it. Then I picked up The Murder of Graham Caton by Katie Lowe. This is one that I actually was listening to the audiobook for via NetGalley and went into an audiobook slump halfway through and didn't end up finishing it up because it'd been like a month and a half and I lost my place. But I was really enjoying it, and I'm very intrigued by this because this basically takes the concept of like true crime podcasts, which I love, and shows kind of the damage that they can do and kind of the ethics of true crime podcasts. So we follow a woman. Her name is Hannah. So 10 years ago, her husband was brutally murdered in their home. Murderer was convicted. The case was closed, but there's this podcast called Conviction, which is investigating this crime, and they think that Hannah did it. So someone knows more than they're leading on, and listeners are about to become a judge, jury, and executioner as they uncover the truth of the murder of Graham Caton. This is a really interesting one because Hannah is obviously hiding something from us. She tells us the story in first person, and I really want to start this over and give it a really solid go because I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating and I need to know what happens. We have another murdery book. This is Dog Rose Dirt by Jen Williams. Indeed, the same Jen Williams who is an award-winning fantasy writer, whose books I still need to read, although they're sat on my shelf. But she has taken a foray into crime fiction, which I think is really fabulous. I love that. So this is a book about a woman named Heather Evans who returns to her childhood home after her mother's inexplicable suicide, and she discovers something chilling. Hundreds of letters between her mother and a serial killer named Michael Reeve, who was known as the Red Wolf. He's been locked up for 20 years in prison for the brutal and ritualistic murders of countless women. So, not something that you necessarily want to find in your mom's house. When the body of a woman is found decorated with flowers, just like Reeve's victims, he is the only person alive who could help, and after years of silence, he will speak to Heather, but only to Heather. This sounds great. I'm really excited for this. This is one that I actually think I'm going to dive into really soon because, as you guys may have seen with my translated Japanese crime fiction, I'm really in a murdery mood, so I think that this is going to be a really good one. Next is a book that has been taunting me for ages, and I finally just decided to pick it up, even though I know it's gonna be very different from a lot of the stuff that I tend to read, but like, I have been seeing this in Waterstones for months, and I just caved and picked it up. This is The Lamplighters by Emma Stonex. This is a very slow literary book. I spent an evening reading, and I made it to page 22. but I think it's going to be really, really fantastic. So this is based on the true story of, I believe, 3 lighthouse keepers in Scotland who just mysteriously vanished one night, and there's like lots of mysterious circumstances. I think it's quite a famous, like, unsolved mystery. So this takes place instead in Cornwall, and we have 3 lighthouse keepers who vanish from a remote lighthouse miles from shore. The entrance to the lighthouse is locked, the clocks have stopped, and the principal keeper's weather log describes a mighty storm, but the skies are clear. That's all pulled directly from this true story. So what happened to the men in the tower? Well, 20 years later, we have the women who they left behind who are struggling to move on. So Helen, Jenny, and Michelle could have been united in this tragedy, but instead they're pulled apart. And now a writer has arrived trying to solve the puzzle, and he gives them a chance to tell their side of the story. But only in confronting their darkest fears can the truth begin to surface. This sounds really, really good. It's another one like something else. The Absolute book, I think, is going to be one where I save it for when I have some time to kind of sink myself into the story, because I think this is going to be a really, really slow burning but rewarding book. Then we have The Mad Women's Ball by Victoria Moss. This is one that was recommended to me by one of my lovely local booksellers, and it looks fabulous. This is another one in my sort of attempt to read more translated fiction. Look at this. Look how cool this is. This is amazing. So this is a short novel that has been translated from French. So this takes place in an asylum in 1885 in Paris, and we have a doctor named Dr. Charcot, and his displays of hypnotism on women who have been deemed mad or hysterical, and are generally outcasts of society, has kind of like got Paris in its thrall. But the truth is much more complicated. For these women, they're often simply inconvenient, so unwanted daughters or wives, and once a year, a grand ball is held in the hospital. So for the Parisian elite, the Mad Women's Ball is the highlight of the social season, and for the women themselves, it's a rare moment of hope. So we follow Genevieve, who is a senior nurse, and she has shunned religion and placed her faith in Dr. Charcot and his new science. But everything begins to change when she meets a new patient, Eugenie, who is a 19-year-old daughter of a bourgeois family, because she has a secret and she needs Genevieve's help. This sounds great. I am totally in love with this cover. I'm in love with like the naked hardback. I'm in love with the concept of the story. I think it's going to be a really, really fabulous read. So I picked up a couple of books from my local charity shop, a couple of thrillers. So the first one is My Sister the Serial Killer by Okian Braithwaite. This was huge when it came out a couple of years ago, and I just never really got around to it, although it sounds really, really fun. So this book follows a woman named Koredi, who is the one who quite literally is constantly cleaning up after her sister. So Ayula, who is her sister, keeps accidentally killing her boyfriends in self-defense, and she keeps calling on her sister to help her tidy up. So this has kind of just been a thing that Koredi does for her sister. Just sisterly love, I guess. And she loves her sister, and family always comes first, until Ayula begins dating a doctor where Koredi works, and Koredi has been in love with for quite some time, which does not bode well for this man. This sounds really, really fun. I'm really looking forward to reading this and seeing what the hype is all about. Then I picked up a copy of The Whispering Man by Alex North. This one I saw a horror TikToker that I quite like talk about a lot, and it sounds very intriguing. So we have 2 characters, Tom and his son Jake, who move to Featherbank looking for a fresh start. So this sleepy little village has quite a dark secret. 15 years prior, there was a serial killer that was haunting the streets, and in the nights before his young victims were murdered, they claimed they could hear him whispering to them in the night. But of course, an old crime needs not trouble Tom and Jake, obviously, until another young boy goes missing, and Jake says that he hears whispering at his window. This sounds like it could be a really, really fabulous read. I don't know anything about this author. I don't know anything about this book, really, other than the fact that someone whose reviews I trust read it and liked it. So here we are. I talked in my July wrap-up about how I've been reading a lot of Junji Ito's books, so I picked up Uzumaki, which is another sort of like big collection of stories. I think this sounds, you'll kind of have to stick with me on this one, but this is basically about a small town on the coast of Japan that is cursed, because there is this like spiral that's kind of like haunting this town. So it's apparently really bizarre, is really quite weird. So I tend to flip through these books just to make sure there's no like stuff that I really don't enjoy, like eye gouging and stuff. And I have caught a glimpse at some pretty horrifying things, and I'm really excited to read this one. Apparently this is a very, very beloved one of his works. I'm really looking forward to it. Then we have The Cat in the City by Nick Bradley. This is a book that takes place in Tokyo and follows a stray cat as she makes her way through the back alleys. So with each detour, she brushes up against the seemingly disparate lives of the city dwellers, connecting them in unexpected and often magical ways. It's about a cat. Sounds great. I'm really excited for this one. This is another one that, kind of like The Lamplighters, has been taunting me from the Waterstones tables for a while. I'm very curious to see what I think. Next up, Fear Street by R.L. Stine. So this is a collection of, I think it's the first 4 Fear Street books, and of course Netflix has just made, I think, a trilogy of Fear Street films, which I still need to see. I was a Goosebumps kid when I was little. I was too young for Fear Street, and then kind of the fad faded by the time I was like a teenager and would be reading these, but I'm very curious about this. This is like, these were published, I think the first one was published in 1989, so it's almost as old as I am. And I'm really pumped about this. I think this is like the most exciting thing ever. 80s and 90s kids I think will understand as well. But this looks great. I love R.L. Stine. This is huge nostalgia for me. We have 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. I read Pandora's Jar last month, really enjoyed it, and decided to pick up some of her fiction. So this is a retelling of basically Helen of Troy, which is one of the people that she talks about in Pandora's Jar. Looks great. Apparently this is fabulous. I keep hearing from everyone that this is amazing, so I'm really looking forward to this. Then, because apparently I'm in a Greek mythology mood, I picked up Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This was also recommended to me by the same bookseller who recommended The Mad Women's Ball. And I've been seeing this around, but I wasn't 100% sure until my friendly local bookseller Hannah recommended it, so I decided to pick it up. But basically it's kind of like modern day Greek mythology meets the Hunger Games. So in modern day New York, a murderous game is about to begin. So every 7 years, for 1 week, Zeus basically punishes the gods and makes them mortal, and they're forced to walk the earth and be hunted by the descendants of ancient bloodlines who are eager to kill a god and seize the divine power and immortality. So we follow a character named Lore, whose family was brutally murdered by one of these rival ancient bloodlines, and she turns her back on the Aegon, which is this event, its cruel promises of eternal glory. So for years she has honored her parents' memory by doing one thing: surviving. And for years she has pushed away dark thoughts of revenge until now. This does sound really fun. I'm very curious about this. I keep seeing people hauling it but not reading it, so I don't know what other people think, but I think it's gonna be fun. And then last but not least is a book I read in the month of July. This is Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Cho Nam-ju. This is one that I loved. You can see me gushing about it in that video. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. If you identify as female, you should read this book. Even if you don't identify as female, you should read this book. It's fabulous, it's powerful, and it will make you so fucking angry. Okay, I think that is everything from this month's book haul. It's a lot of books. I got a lot of reading to do. My TBR is now at 941 books. So yeah. I would love to hear in the comments below if you've read any of these books, if you have picked them up as well, what you thought of them, and also if you hauled anything particularly good in the month of July. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.